All right, the organisers of a new Black Lives Matter rally in Sydney say they're willing to risk catching coronavirus. Protest leader Paul Silver says people are taking a risk going to the shops. I'm not taking a risk buying clothes or shoes, he says. I'm doing it to stand up for justice and Aboriginal lives. Well, let's bring in my panel and see what they have to say. Sky News host of Across Australia, Peta Credlin from Brisbane, and Radio 2GB broadcaster, Sky News host himself, Chris Smith from Sydney. This rally, Chris, is planned next Tuesday, Sydney Town Hall. I listened to some commentary just before I came on air. There's a challenge in the courts. The lawyers for the organiser of the rally say that it was premeditated, the refusal by the police, because of comments the police commissioner made on an interview on your old network, 2GB, or your current network 2GB, that he intended not to allow them to protest. They say that was done before the application was in. I know it's a legal point, but the judge is very interested in what they've got to say. I just don't understand, sitting down here in Melbourne, having to wear a mask today, what these idiots just don't get. I mean, do they want to be where we are? I mean, I can't go to a footy game with 1,000 people in Sydney, but if I go somewhere with 1,000 people and hold up the right sign, somehow that's okay.
We went off our brain over the fact they got together in June. But in June, at that particular time, we had no community transmissions for more than a week in New South Wales. So this is what they were relying on. Oh, you know, it's the pandemic is lessening. We've got masks. We'll be okay. Well, sorry, New South Wales has got almost 50 clusters. It's got several transmissions today that are still a mystery. We don't know where they've come from or the source of them. This is twice as bad at this particular time to hold a rally than it was in June. And we've already got the precedent of the rally that was held in Melbourne, as you rightly mentioned, where we've been able to trace infections of people who were protesters that led to the infections in these public towers. Like, what more do you want? These are the future of this pandemic in the state of New South Wales is now in the hands of these, you know, left-wing activists, these bunch of ferals.
Yeah, look, and the lives of black lives here, yes, they might matter, so says the protesters, but the lives of vulnerable Australians, regardless of their skin colour, obviously don't matter to be able to march like this. I find it just gobsmacking. Galiso, I want to go to this great win today for cattle farmers. I know the National Party were pushing back hard against any sense they might appeal the decision. Today it's confirmation the federal government won't appeal the decision. This shouldn't have taken this long for them to get justice, should it?
Brilliant decision, big win for the National Party, there's no doubt about that. These graziers have been to hell and back. We saw this flawed decision. You were there in Canberra when it was made, Peter. I mean, it was just the most disgraceful decision you could ever imagine by Joe Ludwig. And, of course, the courts have come down very heavily and said that it was completely illegal. But I think what this also demonstrates, Peter, is just what a lethal and terrible force the ABC is when they get together with animal activists. We saw what they did with the greyhounds. We saw what they did with the live export cattle industry. And, of course, the federal court overturned that particular decision. And I think it was great that the Cabinet met last night and decided very clearly, despite the fact that the Attorney-General, Christian Porter, made some very strong points, I understand, on why, they should consider appealing. But in the end, sanity prevailed.
Chris, I want to go back to the points I made about contact tracing at the start. I think most Victorians now think the government has lost control of contact tracing, that they don't have the ability anymore. We know about 2/3 of cases announced every single day. They've got no idea where these cases in the community are coming from. We know at the start of the crisis, they ordered all of this equipment for ICUs. When they thought they were through the worst of it, they cancelled orders or they cut them back. We know today reports the Royal Melbourne Hospital has had to urgently bring in extra ventilators because they don't have enough in Victoria. We saw, as I said, sadly, a man in his 50s had passed away. A lot of people are getting younger that are admitted to hospital. We know there are children there tonight. At what point, people say to me, at what point does the Commonwealth step in and take charge here, Chris? I say the Army should be doing contact tracing. Do you think that's fair?
I think it is. In terms of logistics, you know from Operation Sovereign Borders, when the likes of Jim Molan came in as special envoys, the whole plan of attack changed. It was done strategically, tactically, methodically. It had an end point, it had a midpoint, it had a start point. People made things happen. And this is the strength of bringing in the ADF. Now, look, the two figures that really concern me are the two figures we were given today, which was 447 infections in 35 aged care homes. Now, we had 3 people die from being sent to hospital with COVID from an aged care home today in Victoria alone. 3 alone. That is going to balloon given those figures. 447 in 35 aged care homes. It's got beyond politicians. It's even got beyond the bureaucrats. We had Brett Sutton yesterday talking about, oh, we can't go, we may not have to go in the direction of New Zealand. But then the word out of the Victorian government today is that they're having discussions about going exactly in that direction. It's beyond them. It's out of their control. They've bungled things left, right and centre. Sorry, give it to people who understand how to deal with a crisis and how to follow the chain of command.
I'll go to a speech in London. ABC Chair BUTTROSE says millennial workers lack resilience. Now, I've long felt this is one of the ramifications, Gleeso, of a school system that gives every child a prize and doesn't give children the experience of failure and disappointment. I reckon you learn far more from failing at something than you'll ever learn from succeeding.
100%.
Now, am I being too hard, or is Ida speaking the truth?
No. Ida's speaking the truth. As Cole Chisel said, what Ida says is true. And it's very important we understand we've got entitled snowflakes out there in our communities, in our workplaces, never been through a recession. And I can tell you now, Peter, I was an editor of, 3 big newspapers for 10 years, and I saw a seismic shift over that period in the way in which these youngsters want to be treated. They know everything. They've been indoctrinated. They've been brainwashed in universities, and they come out as left-wing warriors, and they feel a sense of entitlement. Ida said some of them actually need to be hugged every now and again. They need to get fair income and understand that the real world is a lot different to what happens in universities.
She did say that, actually, Chris. She said they are very keen on being thanked and they almost need hugging. That was her, not me. Now, I don't suspect they're going to like that at the ABC, even if it's coming from their chairman. But, you know, I feel for employers at this time. They're doing it tough with COVID. Most of them are going to try and limp through to the end of the year and survive, and hopefully, if they're not in Victoria at least, come out the other side next year. Surely they can expect workers that just turn up on time, don't play politics, do the job. Who'd want to be an employer these days, particularly if you're hiring young people? And
particularly given the fact that we're smack bang in the middle of a recession, and as those payments go down from the end of September, there is going to be a battle on for jobs, no doubt about it. You're going to really have a great deal of commitment. You're going to have enthusiasm. You're going to have a massive work ethic and probably do things in the early part of those months that you probably don't want to do. Have we got the generation right now in the millennials to do that? Well, you read between the lines with what Ida has said, and this is the second time she said it, by the way. You read between the lines, and I have a feeling there's going to be a rude awakening for hundreds of thousands of young people that, you know, they are going to have tougher times than probably their grandparents did at the end of World War II.
Well, Gleeso, you're about my vintage. I certainly finished school and went into the Keating recession, and university at the same time. Was told, don't expect you'll get a job at university when you leave. So every part-time casual job I could get my hands on, I used to take. And it stiffens your spine. I mean, I never want to be out of work. Couldn't afford to be out of work. And maybe that's the only upside I can see in COVID, beyond hopefully getting manufacturing to Australia. It might harden up our young people a bit.
Well, let's hope it does. They need plenty of cement, I can tell you now, because I've noticed it. I know a lot of my colleagues in the newsroom have noted it. And as you look around society, you know, as I said, these guys are entitled snowflakes. They do not react well to criticism. They come in with a sense of entitlement. And I think it's important that employers lay the law down, make sure that they're following the rules, because right now I don't think they are.
Yeah, and I've got to say, before we go to the break, this is not all young people. I have a fantastic team of producers that are in my ear right now, and they work so bloody hard. But, you know, there is a class of millennials out there that need a bit of a shake-up. All right, gentlemen, got to leave it there. Peter Gleeson, Chris Smith, thank you as always.
Thanks, Peter.
All right.